Hi, it's Richard here from Intelligent Advisor IT Consulting with another in our video series about the Sophia integration between Oracle Intelligent Advisor and Salesforce. This video is going to showcase some of the more complex functionalities of the integration that are very hard to achieve if you're doing it yourself, or can involve significant further configuration or development if you're using one of the other solutions. Specifically, we'll be looking at attachments, checkpoints, but also execute query and complex data models. If you're interested in getting involved in the beta program, just follow the link that you saw on the previous slide. And now let's focus our attention on this project. This is a straightforward project that I've mapped to my Salesforce connection, and I'm loading account and I'm updating account and sending some child data for updates and also creating some new child data. The warning message at the top there will tell all of you who are familiar with Intelligent Advisor that I'm using execute query. I'm actually using execute query, which is part of the newer versions of the connector API, to handle two objects, which we'll take a look at in a moment. The interview itself is made up of a series of seemingly random screens designed to test each of these features. So we've got features such as the upload and handling of files. We've got execute query to pull a bunch of notes, irrespective of the context. So we're taking outside it. Now I'm going to create a note for one of the child objects. So I have account as a parent, contact as a child, and note as a child of a child. Then we'll look at editing contacts, viewing contacts, and we'll then demonstrate how to use execute query a second time with a actual filter in it this time. And that's about it. Let's take a look at these objects that are using execute query. The first one is a blank query. There's no query, just it'll bring in 20 opportunities unrelated to the context. So they won't be necessarily related to the account that I'm using as my mapping. The second one, as you can see, uses a multi-level condition spread. The connector supports the entire set of conditions and supports multiple levels, exactly as you would expect in any other Oracle Intelligent Advisor connection. We're also going to talk about how this interview, like all interviews with the Sophia integration, supports natively checkpoints out of the box. So we're back in Salesforce now. Let's pull up one of the accounts. And just so I give you a bit of context, this interview has been placed on an account page. So it's going to automatically draw the account ID as its context for running the interview. In a previous video, we talked about how you can override that context. Let's take a look at the page layout here. You can see that in the page designer, I have a fully operational preview of the interview, so I can immediately get feedback if something isn't quite right, as we spoke about in a previous video. There's a bunch of properties here that we've spoken about, including the locale. I can switch to anonymous mode, which basically means that no data will be saved or loaded, which is very useful if you just want to embed a standalone interview. And the feature that I'm going to remind us, or I'm going to talk about, is the ability to use checkpoints, which I'm going to use by making sure that I have the start or resume feature set up here. Now let's go and test drive this interview. So the interview will start, and on the first page, we were simply loading some account data. So we picked up the context and we should load the account data. There we go. You can see that this account has not many notes and attachments. It only has one attachment. It has a couple of opportunities. It has an opportunity, I think, and a couple or one contact. So first of all, I'm just going to enter some data into this required field here. And now let's see how we interact with all those different objects. On the next screen, we're seeing the opportunities of this account. There's currently only one opportunity for this account. I'm going to go ahead and create a second opportunity. So in this case, I've both loaded and now I'm updating, or I'm inserting an extra record into this child object. So you'll recall that the interview was mapped to account as the parent. In case you were wondering, yes, the lists of values are pulled automatically from the Salesforce application, so that dropdown was populated automatically. I'm going to upload a file to the account because attachments are handled completely as standard within the connector. And I'll go on to the next page. Now I'm looking at an unrelated query. I'm using execute query to pull a bunch of notes. You may recall a moment ago I said that this particular account didn't have any notes. It only had an attachment. So I was able to visualize something out of the context. Now I'm looking at contact notes. So an account has a contact and a contact has a note. So the integration is perfectly capable of handling multi-level data structures. And in this case, I'm looking at contact notes. I'm going to go ahead now and add a new contact note. So this is to one of the contacts within this account. In fact, there is only one contact in this account, but I can attach notes to multiple contacts if they exist within the account. And now this was just to test the download of files. I can edit contacts, or in this case, a contact. I can view contact data. And now I'm going to use execute query again. You'll recall a moment ago when I showed you the opportunity object, there was actually a query on it. I'm not going to use all of the criteria for the query. We're just going to demonstrate. I'm going to put in a number for the amount because that was one of the filters. The second field actually isn't used in the filter. But let's go ahead and let's check that one more time. So yeah, it said amount greater than the filter amount, and stage name equals closed one. So we're going to see a bunch of records, hopefully, with a large amount and or closed one. So we can see that lots of them are closed in one, and those that are greater than the amount I filled in are not necessarily closed in one. So that's a good demonstration of the execute query on the contact, on the opportunities, and our interview is complete. So we also mentioned that the interview had checkpoints, and we'll go and sort those out in a minute, but let's now just review the data where we are now. We can already see that we have another opportunity there, so the opportunity has been successfully added. We can see that in the notes, we have the attachment and the notes that we created for the account. If we go up and find the contact as well, let's drill down on the contact and make sure that the child data was entered for the contact. If we scroll down, we'll see that we have the notes, and we can see the extra note that I added. There was already an attachment there. So we can see that the Sophia integration is perfectly capable and perfectly happy dealing with multi-level complex data structures using execute query. And the last thing we mentioned, of course, was the notion of a checkpoint. So let's go back to the account page and go back to our account. And you'll notice that the interview, when it starts back up on the last page. That's because it's automatically saved the checkpoint after each screen. And there is an attachment here called a CPT, which is the checkpoint file, which is automatically generated for you. If I delete that and then return to my account and go back to the account and restart the interview, you will see that it goes back to the first page. So Salesforce is automatically being sent a file which is used to manage the checkpoint, which means you don't have to waste time developing it. So we've looked at execute query, checkpoints, and complex data models. I look forward to seeing you in the next video in this series. Bye-bye.